The thing is, if you're not aware of it, you're just secretly keeping everyone away and you're keeping everyone at bay so that you don't get hurt. And why? Because you want to protect yourself from being hurt from a way that maybe you were hurt before. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sinead Says Podcast. This week I had a mental breakdown because I recorded a full podcast with Sabrina from The Love is Blind, which was such an amazing podcast. Like, I was so happy to have her on and it didn't record. I'm distraught. So I have to fast forward and do a podcast that I was going to do next week. So what I usually do is when I'm researching and pulling everything up, then I'll practice saying it, and then I come on the podcast and then I say it, and then it usually kind of works for me. So we haven't practiced saying it, so you have to bear with me. I feel like hopefully this will just come out very naturally for me because it's something I went through myself. So today's topic is the fear of commitment, the fear of just getting close to someone, or just generally not being able to get close to a relationship. I feel like this is something that impacts so many people and we're not really taught about it. I personally wasn't taught about it, and I went through it myself, and I went to therapy for it. And unfortunately, not all of us have access to therapy, which is a bit frustrating. So I can take you through everything that I felt and everything that helped me. There is different ways that we are going to go into it. I feel like mine was a fear of commitment due to certain things that had happened to me. Why it's sometimes it's really embedded from childhood, and there's lots of different reasons why. The reason why I'm doing this today is because people deal with fear of commitment all the time, whether you're trying to be in a relationship with someone who has a fear of commitment or you have a fear of commitment yourself. It can be very hard on you and it can be very hard on them, because usually someone that has a fear of commitment will, push people away. And in my own personal experience, seeing people be in relationships with people that have fear of commitment breaks my heart, because they don't feel good enough. They feel like it's their fault, when in fact, the fear of commitment and intimacy is a real life experience. And when you understand it more, then you will melt away your pain a little bit, because you're going to get that closure. Because if you're with someone and then you're having an amazing time, then next thing they shut down and it's over, instead of wallowing in your pain. And obviously you're going to be hurt and painful, and it's going to be painful, but not thinking it's your fault. That's kind of where I want to get to. It's sometimes, and then also for the people that are listening to this who have fear of commitment or who are going through this at the moment, that there is light at the other side of the tunnel, and naming it and understanding it is the first step to getting to where you want to be. And of course, as someone who has overcame it herself, and maybe not there's different types, but the one that I went through was more because of certain experiences I just closed up, which I'm sure some of you will all be familiar with, but sort of knowing why it happens, tips to get through, and just my own experience of getting through the fear of commitment and intimacy. But anyway, before we go into this episode, we are going to talk about the reason why I actually got rid of my fear of commitment, and that is probably because I went to therapy and I didn't have any resources like podcasts or anything like that. I just threw myself into therapy because I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to feel love. I wanted to feel vulnerable, and I wanted to be in a relationship and have a family. So I really dove into therapy for my fear of commitment. And honestly, the way it was guided and everything really, really, really helped me. And little by little, with some of the tools that therapy gave me, I got there, and I feel like I am fully vulnerable, which is so scary, by the way, which also therapy helps me with. I feel like I'm fully vulnerable. I fully let people in, especially my partner, and it is the most amazing feeling. Scary, I know, but the most amazing feeling. And I just want to say that if you want to try therapy, you can use BetterHelp, which is our sponsor. BetterHelp is an online therapy platform. You can access it on your phone. It's an app. You can talk to them. So if you're going through anything like the fear of intimacy, commitment, and you just generally just want to get close to people again, I cannot recommend it enough. So you can get 10% off your first month with betterhelp.com/Sinead. That is betterhelp.com/Sinead. And let me know if you've tried it as well. So again, I just want to tell you that I'm doing this because you need to shine a light on it, because some people don't really understand what's happening in their own brain. They genuinely are so unconscious, and being in an avoidant attachment style or being in that avoidant state of life can sometimes be so unconscious. Like you could literally just be riding along and having short-lived relationships and just thinking, oh, they weren't for me. They weren't for me. But like if the pattern is continuing, that is when you need to address it. And usually people come to a standstill with avoidance and commitment issues when where they become really aware is when they have like a really perfect person in front of them and they still couldn't make it work. Like that person in front of them had all the tick, but yet like they still had all these little excuses to run away. And that is usually where it comes to halt. And it's funny because my own experience is when I was going through these deep fears of commitment, like I was actually dating Sam the first time, who is my partner now. And it's mad because if you read my journal, guys, it's so funny. Like I was like, me and Sam not being together was nothing to do with him. Like when I look back at it at the time, I was like, well, he's like, he works 9 to 5 and he can't travel with me and I want to do this and I want to do that. So maybe he doesn't sit me. Like I had all these excuses to not be with this man, not because he is not the perfect person for me, because he is, but because of my issues of like constantly pushing people away and keeping them at arm's length, because he was the first experience of a relationship after my heart had been completely broken by cheating. It's funny to recognize now that like I was going through keeping everyone at arm's length, not letting anyone close, using all these excuses like, oh yeah, they're not, maybe he's not like got the same kind of vibe as me, or, don't really like his style, don't like his music, or, you have all these little excuses and these icks that people say, and you just use them to not be with them. And that's not really true. Like, yes, we get the ick, right? I understand we get the ick, but like, there's a big difference in like a little ick, breaking up with someone because you don't like the way they dress or something like that. Like that is just keeping someone at arm's length because you don't want to get hurt. And I just want to help people get to the point where I'm at. Like I do feel like there's obviously more serious cases in mine, because I feel like mine was kind of more embedded of a past relationship, whilst when it's embedded in sort of childhood belief systems, it can be very difficult. But the best way to heal from this is to just understand it and become fully aware. Like the moment I realized that I had commitment issues was I was reading the book Attached, and I've went deeper into, attachment theory now, but like reading that book Attached and I was like, I'm a secure attachment. Like, I don't ever feel anxious or want to run after someone, or ever feel like, I never feel like anxious or running after someone, or, if I break up with someone, I'm not upset. Yeah, like that's like avoidance and avoidant attachment. Like you're not even even if you break up with someone, you're not even upset, because you've literally detached yourself emotionally altogether, and you've never let yourself fully get vulnerable anyway, and you have used emotional distance at all costs to make sure you never feel like that. So yeah, that is, if you understand it better. And like the moment I realized was at the very end of the book. And at the end of the book, it was just like, yeah, it's just really sad, because avoidant attachment, you think that, oh, they're breaking up with someone for this big whirlwind reason. Maybe they want to be with someone else, or they have a phantom ex or something like that. But then when they go to the next person, as soon as they get close, it's the same situation. So it's the same cycle over and over again. So that's kind of like where I was like, oh my God, this needs to stop. And I don't want to go on like this. So I decided to go and get a therapy, and that really, really helped me. And like, I'll just, I'll talk about my experience throughout. I didn't really want to dive into like attachment theory, because obviously I've done so many podcasts on it before. If you Google it or if you search it, you'll find it. Like I've done anxious attachment. So this is more like complete fear. There's difference of like, kind of keeping people at arm's length. And this is like a complete fear of commitment. Like I literally cannot get there. You can't get in there. So like it's a bit different. So attachment theory obviously is all about how we attach when we are younger. When we were kids to our parents, like, are we having a secure bond, like a secure love and attachment? Are we getting security? Are we getting love? Are we getting our needs met? And if we aren't getting these things met, then we can end up having insecure attachment theories, which means like we're quite afraid. Like if we're talking about anxious or avoidance here, avoidance anxiety and avoidant attachment. Usually what happens is we don't have that secure bond. So we just rely on our true selves because our needs weren't getting met. So that's kind of like the short form of like attachment theory, but I didn't want to go too much into it. Obviously you've got secure attachment, which is the best, like if you've got that like obsessed with you, and then you've got anxious, which is a bit more like unstable bond, and you really, really want that bond, so you like crave it, and you can also like have not manipulation, but like tactics to get somebody closer. Like you can give them the silent treatment or protest behavior. Anyway, so we're not going into that. We're just going to talk about the fear of intimacy and like the fear of commitment, you know, where it comes from. Like, because the thing about it is that when you bring awareness to it and you figure out the deep dive of like where it comes from, that's usually like the very beginning of the healing. And that's kind of like what therapy does. Like therapy will drive into like, okay, so what happened then when you were a child? And then what happens to you? Did you get, and I love you? You know, what happens, you know, have you ever been praised? Like they will question you a lot to understand where it comes from. And then when you understand where it comes from, it's almost like a lot just melts away and you can understand yourself a little bit better. And then when you understand yourself a bit better, then you can like let people in a little bit. You will notice if you have an avoidant attachment style or you've got a fear of commitment, if you have a short cycle of relationships and there's just the same cycle where you can't really seem to get close to anyone, you could also avoid dating altogether, like complete avoidance. Just like, yeah, I'm not even going to bother with that because that's just going to hurt me. I feel like that's more of a girl thing. I feel like guys kind of go to short relationships and girls kind of go from complete avoidance. Like I'm just sort of guessing that from my own friends and my own behavior with people. Another thing would be like when you're in relationships or when you're in these relationships and you just start fights. Like you just start fights so you can leave. You start fights so that you can pull away. Like as soon as anything gets serious, you just use something as an excuse. Like you've all these tiny little icks, like, oh, they don't get on my friends, or, you know, I don't really like, you know, I didn't think I'd be with someone who has blonde hair. Like honestly, the icks like are crazy, you know, or, you know, they don't have the same lifestyle as me, blah, blah, blah. And like something what I definitely realized in relationships is that, you know, I had that hyper independence myself, where I was like, well, if they don't like fit into my life, then they're not for me. And I used to just sort of live that way, when in fact, like that was a little bit of hyper independence, which could be seen as a trauma response in terms of being severely hurt and you don't want to rely on anybody else. So these are kind of all signs that you're dealing with a fear of commitment. Another thing is like you're constantly waiting for something else to happen before you commit. Like you might be waiting to like lose weight to go on dating. You might be waiting to like maybe you're a certain age. You might be waiting till you get a certain career and then you're like, oh, I'm going to date then. Yeah. So you can fix your career, job, or health or something like that. So all these things can be a sign of fear, commitment, intimacy, and have an avoidant attachment. And I explained attachment and what that means, but usually an avoidant is just someone who just wants to keep everyone at arm's length. And it is very difficult to be in a relationship sometimes. And it has to be like, for example, if you're in a relationship and this person is a wee bit anxious and they're like, where are you going? What are you doing? You're out of the gap. You're out, you're running, because anything that drives you close or you are getting close and vulnerable or at the verge of being what you think is controlled by someone else, then you run. Like the thing is, it's if you're not aware of it, you're just secretly keeping everyone away and you're keeping everyone at bay so that you don't get hurt. And why? Because you want to protect yourself from being hurt from a way that maybe you were hurt before, whether you're a child and you don't remember, or you're in a past relationship where you have been severely devastated to the point where you have been in a really bad place. Personally, that's what happened to me, and that's my own experience. I went into a really, really horrendous dark place, like, you know, very, very bad thoughts, dark thoughts. And I just never wanted to feel like that ever again. And I didn't want to let anyone control anything. So I decided to just shut it all down. And I went through it. And I feel like that is fine. Sometimes when you go through a heartbreak, it is time to have that time on your own and completely defend your heart. But then over time, I realized that like I just wasn't letting anybody in, which was not what we want. It's usually like a deep down protection, which in therapy, I realized there's a little thing in your brain called the protector. And it's always protecting you, whether it's protecting you from failure, from being hurt. Sometimes it just shows up. You get this overwhelming anxiety and you have to pull back. And that was something that actually really helped me in therapy, knowing that like my brain was just trying to protect me and it's not my actual feelings sometimes. And then you would tell your protector to just be quiet. I'm going to be okay. And this is very, very common as well. So we deep down do not think we are worthy. So like not feeling worthy is a common thing we all face, especially Irish people. I do feel like like we were always told to stop showing off and like going into society, we were told what to do, where to go. So I think low self-worth is something that we would all struggle with, but having severe self-worth that you do not believe you're deserving of love in a deep, deep, deep down way can make your brain automatically push someone away. And you may notice this, like if you're in a relationship and you're getting a little bit close to someone, or like maybe you've seen them like flirting with someone in front of you, like when you're early stages and you're like out the gap, you know, you're just running because you just do not want to get hurt, because you do not believe you're worthy. And that deep sense of not feeling worthy can just drive all this behavior, because your brain's just trying to protect you at all times. Where does this come from? Where does commitment issues come from, or the fear of commitment and intimacy come from? Depending on whether you're looking at, you know, attachment theory, like attachment issues in childhood is a massive thing. So, and when you look at certain things, like it's mostly like when it becomes an avoidant, it just means like an insecure bond and you could not rely on anyone to get your needs. All right. So that's like one way of doing it. But also being so heartbroken in your past relationships, and just general pain from trusting someone can really, really get you into this. So the fear comes from pain you felt before usually, and your brain is just trying to protect you. And like, you really want to understand what that is. And you might be listening to this now and be like, what does that mean? And like, you know, where does that come from? Like it sometimes it takes a while to understand where that comes from. It could come from anything. But anyway, these things then will lead to avoidance anxiety. And you have to always remember that avoidance is a coping mechanism, which, you know, is keeping you from being hurt. You know, a lot of people just think like they're really hyper independent and they're really strong and they just don't get too involved in relationships and they don't cry and they don't get upset. But really it's a coping mechanism, so you don't feel that upset ever again. So also like when you have insecure bonds when you're younger, when you have past relationships that were very, very vulnerable, most of the time you have gained your security by yourself in your own mind. So you have gained you've created this unconscious wall basically, and you just don't want to let anyone get in. So you have this fear of like letting anybody in, and it's mostly like really, really unconscious, and we don't want to jeopardize our sense of security that we have created for ourselves. And that is why we just sort of keep everyone at arm's length. We just don't want to jeopardize that feeling of security. But the root of all our fears is just very subjective to our past experiences. All right. So every single person is completely different. So what I might say here today, like, oh, it might have triggered something for you where you're like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. But like for other people, like every experience is completely different. And I can only talk about my own and like anything that I've researched about this. But the main thing we're all here today for is to usually feel like fully loved, and having that fear does stop us from feeling fully loved. So we want to just go into why this happens and, you know, recognizing the little signs as well that will help. Another one actually is like having like relationship anxiety, more like obsessive anxiety about like your relationship has to be perfect before it's a relationship. Like your partner has to be like, looks a certain way, have a certain job, do a certain thing, blah, 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 like has to be this perfect person on paper. And that can be like really obsessive, but it's also a way. So you've got like your little icks, you've got keeping people at arm's length, you've got like starting fights, and then you've got like really obsessive relationship anxiety in terms of like, oh, they don't suit what I pictured. It's just a way, it's just another coping mechanism, really. Obviously, why it happens, we have spoken about overbearing, or didn't receive that love, didn't receive that attention, or you just never got your needs met, and it was like inconsistent, and you know, certain things. And like, you know, I know people are like, you know, does it come from childhood or whatever? But I do feel like obviously everyone's brought up differently. Like personally in our home, like we were never really told love you, or we didn't have massive amounts of like, you know, physical like hugs or anything. And, you know, like, did this like make me like this? I have no idea really. Like I deep down into it, and I feel like my deep stuff came from like maybe just like not getting enough praise or love, not for any fault of like my parents. I don't think they tried their best, you know what I mean? But I just think like because our culture don't pat each other in the back that much or hug or say I love you, like sometimes it's like there can be different things, or like something that happened that really hurt me as a kid, like that can just pull you straight away. For me, like I think like my biggest thing was obviously my breakup like a while ago, and like obviously it was like the darkest time of my life, and then like that made me like go into my shell, because obviously past experiences. If we didn't receive care, security, or love, if you couldn't rely on anyone to get your needs met, and you just push people away, a lot of times it can come from emotional neglect. And if you were raised by emotionally unavailable people, usually like you attract emotionally available people, because like you just it's just a familiar pattern to you as well. So you'll notice that if you have like a fear of commitment or, you know, an insecure attachment, what happens is you end up getting with someone who's completely emotionally unavailable, because that means that you are not going to get hurt. Like you'll chat to someone in a different country, or you'll chat to someone who you know is leaving the country, or you will just talk to someone who's maybe like in a relationship. I've seen that, because they're unavailable for you. So that's easy for you to let your walls down and talk and give out love, because you know that they're not going to come close. So you end up being in relationships with emotionally unavailable people. So that's really, really quite common. But one thing that actually came to my attention here that I thought was very, very interesting is new research suggests that avoidance anxiety can come from a really overbearing parenting, you know, like watching over their every move, like that child not having any independence, basically, you know, like maybe, you know, driving them to school every day, never letting them go on the bus, like being really overbearing, really obsessive, and like not allowing them to do anything. Like they don't really have, it's a lack of independence, right? So when that person then gets out of that control from the parent, that overbearing parent, they never want to feel that way ever again. So anytime they get close to someone, they just want to run, because that feeling of being controlled and having no independence absolutely petrifies them. And obviously in therapy, if you have came across that, or that's something, then you work on that. You realize that these people aren't your parents that are in your relationships, and these people, and you're different now, you're an adult. You would go through all these different steps to ease that anxiety going into a relationship. But I find that one really interesting, because like I feel like a lot of times it's like people talk about emotional neglect and blah blah blah, but I do feel like having like complete control over a child and having no independence, and also like, I don't know, have you seen Tell Me Lies, where there's a lot of emotional abuse, not emotional, emotional manipulation, like in the parent mom, like the guy's mom, like emotionally manipulates them, like, oh, she's like, oh, I'm so hurt, and like you made me do this and you made me do that. Obviously, like being so controlled by emotional manipulation could probably get you to this point where you really don't want to get in a relationship with someone, because you're just going to end up being, you feel like you're going to end up being manipulated constantly and over again for all. And like as a child, you don't know how to get out of it, or you don't understand it, you can't rationalize all these things. So that was a really interesting one for me, and I thought that was just something different than the usual stuff. So that if that strikes your interest. Anyway, more wise, past relationship trauma just contributes so much. Like, you know, as younger people in our teenage years, like we have toxic relationships. Again, Tell Me Lies, toxic relationships. It's really good to, like, I wish Tell Me Lies was something we studied in school, because then you could see the emotional manipulation. And I feel like the emotional manipulation comes from a very, very lack of self-love, self-worth, which is sad, because like you're looking at that person, but like realistically, like they have no self-worth, and they're just like manipulating the situation so that they can feel in control of the situation, because it's the only way they feel loved and secure. But yeah, so past relationship traumas, like teenage years, you know, like, because they're very toxic, because no one actually has the tools. And that is why relationship education should be something that we learn. That is why I'm here. Because I feel like I've been educating myself on relationships for so long. And even some of the courses I've done, I'm just like, there's so much information out there about relationships that we never, ever, ever learn. And that is why I'm so obsessed with being here today and showing you that there is things we need to know about relationships in order to get into them. Because then you're going to end up, if we knew all this stuff before we went into these relationships when we were teenagers, like we wouldn't be having all these attachment issues. We wouldn't have all these things, because we would be so super aware of everything, and we would have the tools to deal with it, and we wouldn't have all this fucking crazy drama. But anyway, so yeah, like early experiences of love, cheating. Wow, that is a big one. You know, the ultimate betrayal. Even friends betraying you can put you into this state. And just like, again, complete lack of self-worth and self-confidence can really get you into this, because you deep down don't believe that you deserve like a family or friend, or like, and then that can really get you into just keeping people away. And that is not what we want. And it can impact us. So, you know, you have a, like, if you're in this, you're having a lack of love. There's also a lot of shame. You feel a lot of shame, because you might be in a, like in your 30s, 40s, and like everyone will be getting married and having kids, and you feel this ultimate amount of shame, and that impacts us so deeply. And when you're in your 20s, no one around you is really caring, right? Because they're all getting with other people, and like everyone's single and enjoying their life. when you get to your 30s and 40s, you can sometimes, a lot of people can just be set with a little bit of shame. And then that impacts us greatly, but also loneliness, just feeling like lonely, lack of vulnerability, like not letting anyone in and not feeling safe. So like if no one knows anything about you or no one has gotten close to you, then it's really hard to feel safe, because we feel safe when we're connected and when we're vulnerable and when we have a tribe and when we have a pack. So that can impact our mental health and our anxiety as well. And it can just close us off to love. And that makes me sad, because that could have been me. But now I'm open to love. I'm just talking about my own experience. So realistically, you getting through it is probably the best thing to do would be therapy. I understand that therapy is something that can be not accessible for anyone. So like, this is why we're here, to talk about it a little bit as well. And I can only talk about my own experiences. So getting through it, I actually feel like the first step is recognizing it. If you're listening to this or you have a friend that you feel is going through this, please send this to them. Recognizing this is literally like, it can be like absolutely mind opening. And also what I was saying before as well, like, you know, all those things that it impacts us, like loneliness and all the things. We often like be hating on a person who's broken up with someone because they've got fear of commitment, but like they actually are going through a lot as well. And that's why I wanted to address it as well here, because it is really sad seeing people, really girls especially, like your friends, like when they come home and they're really upset over a boy because they just couldn't commit. And you're like, oh my God, I just wish you could see how amazing you are. You just didn't, you know what I mean? And like the other person, the fear of commitment person, is probably going through the same thing as well. And it's nothing to do with that perfect person that was probably sitting in front of them. It's usually got to do with their own issues. But at the same time, always remember that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And like, you know, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. So anyway, first thing obviously is recognizing it. Putting a name on it is really important. And then just diving right in, getting like deep internal work, getting to the root. And sometimes that takes a lot of sessions in therapy. Trust me, because like you go into therapy and you think, fine, everything's fine, you know, I have a good upbringing, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, bam, 10 weeks in, you're like, oh, that is why I push everyone away. And like, sometimes you're just so unconscious that like, but that's what a therapist does. A therapist picks and understands and asks the right questions and gets you to uncover some of the reasons why you feel like that. And then when you get that like aha moment, like that is when the work happens. That is when the healing begins, because you literally like, oh, well, I just don't want to get hurt and everything's unconscious and blah, blah, blah. As soon as you figure out, oh yeah, because my mom maybe said that and whatever. And like your past, how you see other relationships growing up, like if your parents are divorced or something like that, like these things can really affect your idea of love. It's hard, right? First of all, we've recognized it, we've talked about it, and I hope you all understand a little bit more. And then therapy for me is the biggest thing. Also learning about it. There's amazing books. Attached is a great book. There's loads of research projects on attachment theory avoidance. You'll find them on PubMed or definitely any sort of podcast therapy, but obviously everyone's individual. So you could be listening to this and nothing might have sparked. But obviously I went to therapy and the therapist had asked me many questions to get me to where I was. And I do feel like that really helped. So a few of the questions that I can remember, I tried to jot them down, was, you know, what is the worst thing that can happen? Like I felt like I just completely blocked myself from, like I was in therapy, like talking to myself like 5 years ago, like, oh yeah, like, you know, like it's bad, like looking back at it. And I used to feel like I just don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to where I was. And the therapist used to be like to me, Sinead, you're not going to go back to the way you were, because you have more tools. You have more understanding of yourself and you're more conscious and aware. You're not going to go back to that dark place. And that was something that really helped me kind of keep dipping my toe in. You know what I mean? Like dipping my toe into like relationships and letting myself be a little bit more vulnerable, knowing that I could trust myself and that I was going to be okay, because I had already gained all the tools and I'm not going to go back to that place. But obviously, because I had known the deep root, what I thought was the deep root, I felt like I could work on it, you know? So sometimes it's hard to get that deeper. You know, another question, like, why are you afraid? What's the worst thing that can happen? You know, like what, you fall in love and then it doesn't work out. Like at least you loved, you know? And I feel like that's such an important lesson. Like it's better to love, like what is that quote? It's better to love than to never love at all. Is that it? Quote of the week. So yeah, that is something that I was like, I would rather feel the full love and then pick up the pieces after and just see what happens. And then another few questions is like, do you actually feel lovable? Do you actually feel fully deserving of somebody to fully love you who you are? And like the best way to like get someone to love you for who you are is to give them who you are. Like no makeup, you know, like you see sometimes like when you're gonna like some friends or whatever, and like they're going out with someone and like they're the boy they're seeing, they've never seen them without makeup. They've never, but that's not what you want to be. You want to be like fully vulnerable and deserving when it's just you, your full self, and being who you truly are. Like, and also like, you know, when you first go out with someone and like maybe you're a bit messy, you're hiding all that, and then like next thing they see you're messy and they still love you, and then you feel like, oh my god, maybe I deserve love. Like it's all these like little things that will help you. So like, do you feel deserving? Do you feel lovable? And you know, where does this come from? Has someone ever made you feel unlovable? Like, you know, if you had emotional abuse in a past relationship and they told you you're unlovable and no one's going to ever love you, like it's like looking at that and like questioning it and being like, is this true? And it's not true. Most of the belief systems that you have instilled from other people are not true. So, you know, even looking at your relationship with, or your parents' relationship, or anything that's to do with any sort of relationships when you're growing up, like your perception of love needs to be challenged, you know, because I always thought that love and like in Ireland, you don't see like your auntie and uncle holding hands, hugging. You don't really see that. And I always felt like love was that. And I always seen that on the TV and being like, oh, I want that. And I want that. And I think I was afraid that like, maybe if I like fall in love or like get married, that like, you know, there won't be as much intimacy. But like when you work at it and you understand and you have an education on love and relationships, you can keep all that going. I mean, we're only 2 years in, not even 2 years in. So I'll let you know how that goes. But like, I feel like sometimes things embed in you and how you see relationships can really like keep you from that. You know, what are your beliefs about relationships? What did you see growing up? You know, maybe people are divorced in your family. You know, what was other relationships look like? Where did your idea of love actually come from? Like these questions, you don't have to answer them right now, but like actually really deep. These are the things that just the therapist continued to ask me. And then like, you know, ask yourself, like, what do you actually want? Like, what do you want from a relationship? And like, are you willing to sacrifice? And that like a lot of avoidance anxiety, like they don't want to sacrifice anything because they're hyper independent, or they just feel like that leaves them very vulnerable. But realizing that relationships require sacrifice was one of my biggest things that helped me. As I said before, I was like, well, if they don't fit into my life, I'm realizing that like when you value security and love and it's the top of your values, which mine is at the moment. Years ago, the top of my values was adventure and stuff like that, like freedom, but now it's security. You know, I'm willing to make sacrifices for my partner. You know, I even said like Sydney's the most amazing place I've ever experienced and I want to be here forever. Like I always say, like, I love this place so much, I would never give up a man, but like because my value is so much with my partner and my commitment. Like, you know, if he had to move somewhere, like I would have to sacrifice that because he's my main priority at this moment. Whereas like years ago, you would ask me, I'd be like, absolutely not. No, you know, something that's very, very valuable is also taking a lot of time on your own. But taking time on your own and validating yourself, because I feel like when I was younger and I didn't have self-worth or validation, like I was validating myself through everyone thinking I was funny, party girl, going out, or everyone thinking, or I was like chatting, or I was with someone, I was validating myself through other people, getting self-worth through relationships and getting self-worth through, you know, just different things that didn't involve myself. Now, like, I feel like I went through this whole process that me as I am, I accept me exactly who I am, and I love me, and I feel like I validate my own self. I know exactly what I like. I have boundaries. I don't people please as much, but I definitely am a still people pleaser. And like validating my own self and not like using other things to tie me to my worth really, really helped. And just taking that time on my own and reading and understanding myself and reading these books and listening to these podcasts, doing courses, meditation retreats, all these things are so impactful for me. And the next thing I would say, challenge your beliefs and your thoughts at all times. So if you're going through this, get your journal out. Why do I feel like that? Why do I feel like I need to push this person away? Where did this idea that come from that I shouldn't be with this person or whatever? And like one of the main things that was taught to me in therapy going through the fear of commitment was leaning in, bit of exposure, you know, dipping my toe in here and there, you know, just dipping in. And every time I felt this need to pull back, like the therapist would be like, just lean in. And I would be like, oh. But I did it. and leaning in and realizing when you become more vulnerable, it's like almost you're scared for someone to see you who you are. And then all of a sudden, when they fully see you who you are, not about what business they own, not about how much money you have, not about how you look, not about anything. And when they just see you for who you are and you see that they still love you, it's the most healing feeling ever. I'm sure, girls, if you've been in a relationship as well and you've had your own self-love journey and then you're just loved by someone, you just, at your worst, they're just obsessed with you. Like, I'm obsessed with my boyfriend, and at all, like, it wouldn't matter if he did anything, I would just be, and that it's recognizing that as well, that you're lovable as you are, no matter your status, no matter your wealth, no matter what you look like, you're so lovable as you are. And like one day you're going to find that. And like sometimes you just have to lean in just a little bit, you know, when you feel that ultimate fear. And then it's like, you have to lean in a little bit. Also, meditating, calming down your thoughts with meditating is amazing. Actually, I should plug my own business if you want to start meditating. The Brave Way has a whole app full of like 75 meditations. And it's all for the price of like a coffee per month. So you can use code MEDITATE to get a discount as well. Am I doing it some more? I don't know. Also, another thing that I really helped me, and I will tell people, is just over communicate with your partner or with the person you're about to get into this with. Hey, I have a little bit of a fear of commitment. I do get really freaked out. I do actually panic in situations, and like, I don't want to do that with you. I feel like you're a really good person. So can you work with me on this? And usually that person is hopefully understanding. Obviously, if they have an anxious attachment, sometimes they can be really scared, but them knowing the full truth instead of you just retracting can really, really help. So just being like, hey, I get a little scared, or like maybe like someone goes, oh, do you want to meet my mom and dad? Oh, just so you know, this actually really frightens me. Okay, let's talk through this. How are you feeling like this? Why are you feeling like that? You know, sometimes talking through it, like over communicating everything that you feel, is a really good tactic to help you through this. And also if you are with someone as well, like it's just easier for them rather than getting the cold shoulder. So then they know that it's not their fault, because like they don't, it's not their fault either, you know, like it's just sometimes these things happen. I really hope this helped and it really helped me, and it really helped. And I feel like when my friends come to me and they've been with someone who's got commitment issues and I tell them all this stuff, like it really gives them a lot of closure as well and helps them understand. So, you know, reach out to your friends who have a fear of commitment. You can give them this podcast. You can let them know that therapy helps, certain books. And yeah, I can't even do the rest of my podcast because, you know, the way I usually do like quote of the week on the thing, I'm like, I don't want it to be over an hour, so I'm going to have to just wrap it up. Also, if you're in Sydney, we are having a live show, 15th of January. Tickets are in the are below. We're so excited. Loads of spot prizes, all the jazz. Also, if you want to give us a review, that'd be really helpful too. Thank you so much, and good night.